The velvet room pulsed like a slow heartbeat under gold light and soft saxophone. Amara Wells, 27, moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her tray gliding between laughter and whispered deals. Every night she told herself she was invisible here, until the night he arrived. Malcolm Duvall, 35, stepped through the entrance in a tailored charcoal suit that fit him like control itself. His gaze was steady, detached, assessing the world as if it were another acquisition. Their eyes met, a quiet collision between fire and ice. When she set his drink before him, his voice was low, measured, and final. "You belong to me," he murmured, almost a test. Her breath caught, unsure if she heard right. The room seemed to fade, leaving only the hum of jazz, the heat of his stare, and the trembling in her chest that whispered she had just crossed a line she didn't know existed. Amara retreats to the service station, heartbeat quick and confused. The air feels heavier now, her name still echoing beneath his words. She laughs nervously with Tasha, pretending nothing happened, but her reflection in the mirror behind the bar betrays her. Wide eyes, flushed cheeks, and something she doesn't want to name. Power? Fear? Desire? Maybe all three? She senses his gaze on her still, across the room, patient, unyielding. Malcolm remains seated, untouched drink before him. He studies her reflection in the mirror behind the bar, his mind calculating and strangely uncertain. He doesn't believe in chance. Everything in his world is orchestrated. Yet something about her defies his logic. She's not just another distraction. She's a disruption. The night stretches on. Amara serves, smiles, moves like rhythm itself. But inside, something new trembles awake. A man like that doesn't notice women like her. Yet he did. And when he whispered those words, they didn't sound like flirtation. They sounded like fate. As she locks up her section, Amara glances once more toward the corner booth. Empty. Only a single untouched drink remains, and beneath it, a black business card with embossed silver letters, Malcolm Duvall. The weight of it in her hand feels heavier than glass. Outside, the night hums low and dangerous. She exhales into the chill, whispering to herself, "Don't start something you can't finish." 3 nights pass, and the velvet room hums beneath its usual glow. Amara Wells, 27th, moves through the crowd with careful poise, pretending not to look toward the door. She tells herself she's over it. That one whisper from a stranger means nothing. But then he appears again. Malcolm Duvall, 35, glides through the crowd with silent authority, eyes fixed only on her. He waits until she's near the bar, then gestures for her to approach. In his voice, there's no apology, no hesitation, only command disguised as invitation. "I need a private server for a business event tomorrow night. Be there." It isn't a question. His tone slides beneath her defenses like silk and smoke. She hesitates, wanting to say no, yet her lips betray her with a quiet, "Yes, sir." In the corner of the lounge, away from listening ears, Malcolm explains his request. His words are concise, efficient, almost transactional. Yet every pause feels personal. Amara listens, torn between professionalism and curiosity. She tries to steady her breathing as he leans in, his cologne crisp and deliberate. "You'll be compensated well," he says, sliding a small envelope across the table. Inside, the address to his private residence. His gaze lingers just long enough to suggest more than business. Back in the staff corridor, Amara leans against the wall, the envelope burning against her palm. Tasha spots it instantly. "Girl, what is that?" Amara shrugs, trying to sound casual, but her voice cracks. Tasha's laugh fades as she studies her friend's face. "That man's trouble, Amara. And you look like you want to find out just how much. Amara exhales. Maybe I already did. At home later that night, Amara sits by her small window overlooking downtown Atlanta. The city hums beneath her. Cars, sirens, music, while her reflection in the glass looks like a stranger's. She opens the envelope, unfolding the invitation to a world that feels unreachable. Her mother's laughter echoes faintly from the next room, reminding her who she is. But her fingers trace the embossed address again. She's caught between two worlds, one she knows, and one she secretly wants to taste. The next evening arrives. Amara stands outside the Duval estate, a glass and steel mansion perched above the city. Her cab pulls away, leaving her alone beneath the sweeping driveway lights. She breathes deep, adjusts her dress, and steps toward the massive doors. A butler greets her, leads her through marble corridors and soft jazz echoing in the distance. Then she sees him. Malcolm waits at the end of the corridor, watching her approach like a man who already knows the ending. When their eyes meet, the world narrows to silence. His smile, if it can be called that, is dangerous, almost tender. "Welcome, Ms. Wells. You're right on time." The Duval estate hums with quiet power, a living museum of glass and silence. Amara Wells, 27, follows the butler's lead through corridors lined with modern art until she reaches the main dining hall. Malcolm Duval, 35, waits at the long oak table, an untouched meal between them. He thanks her for coming, voice smooth but restrained. She notes how every gesture seems rehearsed, every word chosen to avoid feeling. Over dinner, conversation dances between business and curiosity. He asks about her life, her mother, her dreams. When she mentions wanting her own cafe, something flickers in his expression. For the first time, he smiles, small and genuine. The moment softens him, and for Amara, it opens a door she isn't sure she should walk through. After dinner, he invites her to see the art gallery on the upper floor, paintings of city skylines, muted and cold. "I bought them for the light," he says quietly. "They remind me of what I can't control." His confession surprises her. Beneath the millionaire's composure lies loneliness shaped like discipline. As she studies a painting of dawn breaking over glass towers, he watches her. Not the art. "You see warmth in everything," he murmurs. She answers softly, "Someone has to." They step onto the balcony overlooking the city. The wind carries music from somewhere below, a jazz note bending through distance. Amara leans against the railing, hair loose, eyes wide with wonder. Malcolm stands beside her, silent for a long moment before admitting, "I haven't done this in years," shared quiet with someone. She glances up, half smiling. "Maybe you should try it more often." He almost laughs, the sound low and unfamiliar even to himself. Inside again, Amara prepares to leave. Malcolm offers his car, but she refuses gently. "I know my way back." He admires the quiet authority in her tone. "You're not what I expected," he says. "Neither are you," she replies. Their eyes hold for a second too long. The pause between distance and invitation. He extends his hand. She shakes it. A charge passes between them, not possession, but recognition. The moment lingers like an unfinished sentence. Back in her apartment, Amara sits awake long past midnight. The night hums outside, but her thoughts replay his words, his quiet gaze. Something about him unsettles her. Not danger, but depth. She knows better than to trust men who promise power. Yet this feels different. Maybe curiosity is its own kind of risk. When her phone vibrates, a new message appears. "Thank you for tonight." No signature. She smiles faintly, then turns off the screen, letting darkness and possibility share her pillow. Weeks pass. Malcolm Duvall, 35, and Amara Wells, 27, move in a rhythm that neither defines. Lunch meetings, gallery visits, unspoken glances across crowded rooms. Yet, beneath the warmth, unease brews. When Amara visits his office to deliver catering for a meeting, she overhears him discussing her name with an associate, her debts, her address, her job history. "I just wanted to know who I'm dealing with," he says when confronted. Her voice trembles with anger. "You investigated me." His answer is simple, cold. "I protect what I care about." The words sting worse than any insult. Protection in his language sounds too much like control. Amara storms out, wind slicing across her face as she hits the parking lot. She doesn't know if she's angrier at him or at herself for caring. Her phone buzzes again and again, his name lighting the screen. She silences it. In her chest, betrayal coils like heat. Not just for the invasion, but for the way she had begun to believe he saw her as more than curiosity. The city feels louder, harsher. She swallows tears, reminding herself she survived worse than heartbreak. Inside his office, Malcolm watches her leave through the window's reflection. For a man who built empires on precision, the chaos she leaves behind feels unbearable. Elias Vance, his confidant, steps forward quietly. "You can't manage her like a deal," he says. Malcolm doesn't respond. He just stares at the door she vanished through, jaw tight, a rare fracture showing. "She's not a deal," he finally says. "She's the only thing that's ever made sense." But even he doesn't believe his own words. That night, Amara sits at her mother's small kitchen table, exhaustion softening her anger. Ruth Wells asks no questions, just pours tea and listens. "You always give people too much of your heart," Ruth says gently. "Maybe it's time you keep some for yourself." Amara nods, tears finally falling. The warmth of her mother's words feels like something she forgot she needed. A reminder that love should never feel like ownership. A week later, the silence between them breaks. Malcolm appears outside the cafe where Amara picks up extra shifts. His presence turns heads, but he doesn't care. He simply says, "I owe you an apology." She studies him, uncertain whether to laugh or cry. "You can't buy trust, Malcolm." His gaze softens. "Then let me earn it." The sincerity in his tone startles her. For the first time, the cold millionaire sounds human. She doesn't answer, only nods once, enough to mean maybe. Rain drizzles across the city as Amara Wells, 27, hurries into the Velvet Room for her evening shift. She hasn't spoken to Malcolm in days, though his messages still fill her phone like unanswered questions. Tonight, the lounge feels different, quieter, watchful. As she sets down her tray, she spots him near the bar with another woman. Elegant, poised, laughing softly at something he says. Her stomach drops, the world narrowing to the glass in her hand. He looks up then, catching her gaze across the room. No words, just the space between them, heavy with all the things they never said. She finishes her shift in silence, each order a distraction from the ache building behind her ribs. Tasha corners her near closing, concern in her eyes. "Talk to him before you decide what you saw," she warns, but pride burns hotter than pain. Outside, Malcolm waits by his car, umbrella tilted against the rain. "She's an investor," he says before she can speak. Amara crosses her arms. "You don't owe me explanations." He exhales, rain darkening his shoulders. "Maybe I owe you honesty." Her voice breaks on the edge of anger. "Then you should started there." The drive home feels endless. She replays his words, his tone, the faint trace of regret she almost believed. But believing means risking heartbreak again. At a red light, she deletes his number, thumb hovering for one last hesitation before pressing confirm. The screen goes dark, mirroring her face in the glass. Somewhere in the city, Malcolm sits alone in his car, watching the rain blur the skyline. Both think the same thought, whispered differently. Maybe love isn't enough if we can't trust it. Days pass like a blur of unanswered questions. Amara Wells, 27, throws herself into work. Extra shifts, late nights, anything to keep from thinking. Yet Malcolm's absence lingers like perfume that refuses to fade. One evening, as she cleans up after closing, Elias Vance arrives at the lounge. He's calm, polite, his presence unexpected. He never meant to hurt you, Elias says quietly. He's not good at people, just business. Amara stops wiping the counter, eyes sharp. And I'm not one of his deals. Elias hesitates before replying. That's exactly why he's afraid. When he leaves, the silence feels heavier than before. A silence filled not with anger, but confusion over whether she's ready to forgive. That night, Amara returns home to find a small package waiting at her door. No name, no card. Inside, a single white lily and a folded note, written in precise handwriting. I'm learning that control isn't care. I'm sorry. She sits on the edge of her bed, the flower trembling slightly in her hand. For the first time in weeks, she allows herself to breathe. The apology doesn't fix everything, but it feels real, like a man trying, however clumsily, to change. As dawn touches the city skyline, Amara places the lily in a glass of water by her window. For now, that's enough. Morning spills into the Duvall penthouse through tall glass walls. Malcolm Duvall, 35, sits alone at his desk, surrounded by half-read reports and untouched coffee. The lily he sent Amara remains in his thoughts. For the first time, he wonders what love looks like when it isn't earned by dominance. Elias enters quietly. You've been staring at that skyline for an hour, he says. Malcolm answers without turning. It's strange, isn't it? You can own buildings and still feel small. The admission feels foreign in his mouth. He knows he has to see her, not to win, but to understand. Across town, Amara Wells, 27th, visits her mother. Ruth fusses over breakfast while gospel music hums from an old radio. You look lighter, Ruth says, sliding her a cup of tea. Amara smiles faintly. Maybe because I finally stopped expecting people to know how to love me right. Ruth chuckles. That's how you teach them. The simplicity of those words settles into Amara's heart. Maybe forgiveness isn't surrender, it's freedom. She glances out the window, sunlight warming her face, and for the first time in months, she doesn't feel afraid of what comes next. Later that day, Amara walks through Piedmont Park. Autumn leaves swirling around her feet. She pauses near the lake, phone buzzing in her pocket. It's him, Malcolm Duvall. For a moment she hesitates, then answers. His voice is calm, stripped of its usual armor. Amara, I don't expect another chance. I just want you to know I'm trying to be better than the man you met. The words settle over the line like rain on still water. She exhales softly. Then start by letting yourself be human. Neither hangs up. They just listen to the wind, the silence, and the sound of something broken quietly mending. That evening, Malcolm stands in the foyer of the Velvet Room once more. The place feels smaller than he remembers. Warmer, almost human. He watches Amara from across the floor as she takes orders, laughing lightly with a table of guests. For a moment, he considers turning back, pride and regret battling in his chest. But then she notices him. Their eyes lock, neither moving. Slowly, she excuses herself and walks over. You found your way back, she says, voice steady but unreadable. I never left, he replies quietly. I just didn't know how to show up. The words hang between them, fragile but true. She nods once. Then start now. They step outside after closing. The city air carries a hint of rain, streetlights painting soft halos on wet pavement. Malcolm takes a slow breath. I built my life on being untouchable, he admits. And you made me realize how lonely that feels. Amara studies him for a long moment before answering. Maybe that's why we met. To remind each other what being human looks like. He smiles faintly, a rare, unguarded expression. The silence that follows isn't heavy anymore. It's alive with possibility. Amara turns toward the streetlight, exhaling, voice low. We don't have to figure it out tonight. He nods. But I'd like to try. 2 weeks later, sunlight breaks over Atlanta's skyline. Soft and gold. Amara Wells, 27th, opens the door of a small storefront on Auburn Avenue. The empty space she's dreamed of turning into her cafe. The keys jingle in her hand to sound equal parts fear and freedom. She's done this herself. Every form signed, every dollar saved. As she walks the room, light spilling across bare walls, she whispers, "Finally, mine." For once, the word mine doesn't mean possession. It means purpose. Outside, the city hums, alive and waiting. Later that afternoon, she's surprised when Malcolm Duvall, 35, appears at the doorway. Sleeves rolled, no suit jacket this time. He carries 2 cups of coffee and an awkward half-smile. "I heard you signed the lease," he says. "I wanted to see what your dream looks like." Amara studies him, wary but softened. "It's still empty," she answers. He glances around the sunlight-washed space. Doesn't feel empty. For the first time, their silence feels like partnership, not power. She gestures toward an unpacked paint can. "If you really want to help, grab a brush." They paint in companionable silence, laughter breaking the quiet now and then. Malcolm's careful strokes smear into a crooked line and Amara teases, "For a perfectionist, you're terrible at this." He grins, a soundless laugh shaking his shoulders. When the sun begins to set, they stand side by side, covered in specks of paint, looking at the fresh walls. "This place suits you," he says softly. It's honest, she glances at him. "So are you, finally." The air between them hums, not with ownership but understanding. 2 people choosing, freely, to stay in the same light. Evening settles, and the new cafe glows like a lantern against the city's dusk. Paint cans line the wall, brushes soaking in jars. Amara Wells, 27, wipes her hands on a rag, glancing toward Malcolm Duvall, 35, who leans by the counter watching her with quiet admiration. For once, he isn't trying to fix or command anything. He is just present. "You built this," he says. "I helped a little," she teases. He shakes his head. "No, you believed when I couldn't." She studies him, realizing that the distance between them has turned into respect. "Maybe that's what belonging really is," she says. "Seeing each other, not owning." He nods, smile small, eyes soft. "Then I want to keep seeing." Weeks later, the cafe opens to the public. Morning light streams across fresh tables, laughter and the smell of roasted beans filling the air. Ruth Wells sits by the window, pride shining in her eyes as her daughter moves easily behind the counter. A familiar voice cuts through the soft bustle. Malcolm, placing the first official order. "1 black coffee," he says, "and whatever she recommends." Amara hands him the cup herself. "It's called belonging," she says with a smile. He raises the mug, returning the smile. "Then I'll have that." The camera pulls back through the doorway, the scene framed by sunlight and the steady rhythm of a city still moving. But for these two, finally at peace.